Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's having a good summer break. I wanted to jump on here and talk to you guys about what I believe is the greatest love story ever told in the Bible. And it happens to be between two men, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So I am actually supposed to just now be getting back from vacation. My best friend and I were going on a 5-day cruise. It was going to be so fabulous, but I ended up getting sick. So I couldn't go. Devastation. I love cruises. Anybody who knows me knows that I love to cruise. But she went on, and so she got back last night. Thank God she got back safe. She's all good. I'm sure she had a blast. I mentioned her in my cruise because it kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about today, friendship. So you guys, lately, it seems like we are really quick to just throw our friends away. And I have been guilty of this myself in the past, and it's just not okay. Like we throw our friends away for the most ridiculous things. And that's not what love is. So I want us to get into the greatest love story ever told between two men. This is the story of the friendship between King David, who wasn't king yet, and Jonathan. So now we just finished with Solomon's temple, the building of Solomon's temple, and that is in 1 Kings. So we're going to go back a little bit because, as you know, our lessons don't cover everything. So we're going to go back a little bit to 1 Samuel, and there are some things in here that I want us to cover. Specifically, the love story between David and Jonathan. To me, is just amazing. Here you have David, who's being pursued by King Saul. Now, David isn't king yet, but he knows he's going to be king. Saul also knows that David is going to be king. So King Saul is pursuing David. He wants to kill him. Jonathan is King Saul's son. So on one hand, you have a man who is best friends with the son of the king who is trying to kill him. Okay? David is best friends with Jonathan, whose dad is trying to kill David. On the other hand, you have Jonathan, whose father is the king. He knows his father is trying to kill David, his best friend. He fights in his father's army. He lives with his father. He's still a son to his father. And he's loyal to David. He warns David of when his dad is coming after him and things like that. And is still best friends with David. And also with Jonathan. Jonathan could have become king after his father. Because his father is King Saul. And the kingship could have gone to Jonathan. But the kingship is going to David, and Jonathan knows that, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care. This is his best friend. And so, to me, their love story is like the greatest love story told in the Bible. At least so far, because we're just in the Old Testament. Again, let me say this. Jonathan, who could be king because his father is king, knows that David is going to be king, and he could be really upset about that, but he doesn't care. He wants David to be king. They're best friends. That's amazing. David, whose friend's father is trying to kill him, and he could hold that against Jonathan, but he doesn't. He doesn't care. They love each other. They love each other so much. So let's take a look at their story, and this is an example of love, for one, real, genuine love, and love between friends, and friendship, and just an amazing story of love and friendship. So let's take a look. So Saul ends up being disobedient to God. He offers a sacrifice, and he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to wait on Samuel. Samuel was the priest. He was supposed to offer the sacrifice, and because Saul offered the sacrifice, God decided that Saul wasn't going to be king anymore. He stripped that away. He was going to give it to David. In chapter 16, Samuel, the priest, goes and finds David and anoints him as king. Saul is still king, so it's not David's turn yet, but David is going to be the next king. Of course, then David goes to work for Saul in a couple of capacities. He runs out and defeats Goliath in the war. Saul ends up getting this evil spirit on him, and the only thing that soothes him is David playing the harp for him. So David plays the harp for him. Jonathan and David, 1 Samuel chapter 18. Now it came about when he had finished speaking to Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. That to me sounds like the ancient equivalent to the modern soul mate, okay, between these two men. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. That is amazing. So Saul took him that day and did not let him return to his father's house, talking about David. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. He loved his friend the way he loved himself. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, with his armor, including his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and prospered. Okay, so now we're going to get into the part where David is prospering, and the people are noticing. And so the women are singing, Saul has slain his thousands, David has slain his 10,000s. Saul hears this, becomes angry and jealous of David. Saul ends up turning against David. Although Saul has turned against David, he still gives his daughter Michal to David as a wife. So in exchange for Michal as a wife, David had to go out and fight the Philistines and return back with his bridal gift, which you can read about in 1 Samuel chapter 19 verses 25 through 27. After that happened, Saul hated David even more. Okay, so we get to chapter 19. Now Saul told Jonathan his son and all his servants to put David to death, but Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. So Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. Now therefore, please be on guard in the morning, and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. If I find out anything, then I will tell you. So here you have an example of Jonathan still being a son to his father, but he knows his father is doing the wrong thing by trying to kill David. And so because he loves David, he's got a conundrum. He's still being a son to his father, but because he loves David, he's not going to let his father kill him. Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, do not let the king sin against his son, against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very beneficial to you. So he's trying to convince his father not to go after David. For he took his life in his hand and struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death without a cause? Okay, here he is advocating for his friend, the friend that he loves the way he loves himself. So Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. But as we know, as the story continues, Saul changes his mind a few times. And like he'll say, I'm not going to go after David, but he continues to go after David. Not very long after this, he actually goes after David. So then David has to flee. In chapter 19, David flees and escapes to Samuel at Ramah. Okay, we get to chapter 20. David fled from Naoth in Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity? What is my sin before your father that he is seeking my life? He said to him, far from it. This is Jonathan. Far from it. You shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. Yet David vowed again, saying, your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight. And he has said, do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death. So David is saying, your dad knows how much you love me, so he's not going to let you know that he's trying to kill me. Then Jonathan says to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. Whatever you say, I will do for you. This is how much this man loved this man, okay? This is how much these friends loved each other. So David said to Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I ought to sit down and eat with the king. But let me go that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me. Okay, so this is just like a plan that they're coming up with to see how Saul is feeling about David. Verse 12 summarizes this. Then Jonathan says to David, the Lord God of Israel be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day, behold, if there is a good feeling towards David, shall I not then send to you and make it known to you? So they're trying to feel out Saul and see how he's feeling about David. And Jonathan is saying, if there's a good feeling towards Saul, from Saul towards you, David, then I'll send for you and I'll let you know. Verse 13, if it please my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not make it known to you and send you away that you may go in safety. And may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. So if he finds out that if Jonathan finds out that Saul does want to do harm to David, Jonathan is like, if I don't let you know, then it's on me. Okay, the Lord deal with me if I don't let you know. This is how much I love you. So the next day, David was supposed to eat with Saul. He was not there. Saul asked, why is David not there? Jonathan replies, David earnestly asked, leave me to go to Bethlehem, for he said, please let me go sacrifice to my family and be with my brother and all that. So this is the plan that they were going to use to suss Saul out, to see if he had any negative feelings towards David. And of course he did. Verse 30. Then Saul's anger burned against Jonathan, and he said to him, this is what he said to him. You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Now what does that sound like? That's like the ancient equivalent of you know. Do I not know that you are choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? So like, how are you're choosing David over, this King Saul, you're choosing David over me. I cannot believe he called his son, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Y'all know what that is. So Saul is trying to get Jonathan to realize that as long as David lives, Jonathan won't be king. So verse 31, for as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Therefore now send and bring him to me, for he must surely die. But Jonathan answered Saul his father and said to him, why should he be put to death? What has he done? This is so crazy. Like, Saul is he's out of control. Then Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him down. So Jonathan knew that his father had decided to put David to death. Well, yeah. I mean, because if he's hurling his spears at you, his son, then he's definitely trying to hurl some spears at David. So then Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat the food on the second day of the new moon, for he was grieved over David because his father had dishonored him. Okay, so this is the love between these two men. They're dealing with a lot. Like, dad is trying to kill my best friend, and now dad is trying to kill me. So they're dealing with a lot here. We go on and on through Samuel, and Saul is pursuing David. David is fleeing and David has these opportunities to kill Saul, but he doesn't. And he doesn't do that specifically, he says, because Saul is the Lord's anointed. So he's not gonna kill Saul because the Lord has anointed Saul. The Lord has anointed Saul. That's an amazing side story of when God anoints someone, the respect that you have for this person should be through the roof, regardless of what they do. God anointed this person. So David's respect for Saul, or his respect for God and his love for God, was so high that even though he had the opportunity to kill this man that was trying to kill him, he didn't, because he was the Lord's anointed. That's an amazing story in and of itself. This goes on and on throughout the entire rest of the book of 1 Samuel. David ends up fleeing to the Philistines and living with them for, I think, about a year or so. The Philistines were constantly fighting against Israel. And as we get to chapter 31, the Philistines are fighting with Israel. Saul is fighting. Saul's sons are fighting. And Saul and his sons end up killed in this battle, and Jonathan is included in being killed in this battle. And this is during the time where David is living with the Philistines. He wanted to fight with the Philistines, but they didn't trust him, so they sent him home. So he did not fight. But the Philistines attacked Israel, and they ended up defeating Israel. Saul ended up dying. His sons ended up dying. Jonathan ended up dying. 1 Samuel 31. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchi-Shua, the sons of Saul. The battle went heavily against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. This is where he was wounded. He didn't want to be killed by the Philistines, so he asked one of his he asked his armor bearer to draw his sword and kill him, but he didn't want to do that because he was afraid. So Saul took out his sword and fell on his sword. Turns out later that actually didn't kill him either. He was actually killed by an Amalekite later, but that's what happened in chapter 31. So then we go over to 2 Samuel, where David learns of Saul's and Jonathan's death. And this is interesting to me because it also shows David's respect for God's anointed. So David learns of Saul's death from the Amalekite that killed Saul. The Amalekite comes to David, and he tells him about how Saul was killed, and David asks, "How do you know that Saul was killed in this way?" The Amalekite tells him that Saul begged him to kill him because he was still alive, and so because Saul begged him to kill him, the little Amalekite boy killed him. And after he heard of this, in verse 11, then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so also did all the men who were with him. This is how they mourned. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the people of the Lord and the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. So David's heart is not only is he mourning for his friend Jonathan, but he is mourning for Saul, the man who tried to kill him, because God anointed him and all of Israel. So then this is interesting, a little side note. David said to the young man who told him, "Where are you from?" And he answered, "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite." Then David said to him, "How is it that you were not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" And David called one of the young men and said, "Go cut him down." So he struck him down and died. So he struck him and he died. David said to him, "Your blood is on his head, for your mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed." This is how much respect and I know that as modern thinkers, we're like, well, I mean, why would he kill somebody who killed his enemy? This is just how they did it back in the day, you guys. This is ancient times. This is how they did it. So I can speak of his respect, David's respect for the Lord and the Lord's anointed, because David's not going to kill the Lord's anointed, and neither is anybody else, and get away with it. So in verse 17, this is David lamenting Jonathan and Saul. Then David chanted with this lament over Saul and Jonathan his son, and he told them to teach the sons of Judah the song of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So there's this whole verse 19 through 27 where David sings this song lamenting Jonathan. I'm just going to hit a couple of places where he talks about Jonathan. Verse 22, from the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. He mentions Saul, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. 23, Saul and Jonathan, beloved and pleasant in their life, and in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. And I'm going to go over here to verse 26 or verse 25. How have the mighty fallen in the midst of the battle? This is his friend Jonathan. Jonathan is slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was more wonderful than the love of women. That's That is a friend. That is love, and that is a friend. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was more wonderful than the love of women. How have the mighty fallen and the weapons of war perished? I just think that is an amazing, amazing love story between two men who were best friends. And I think that shows us how we are to be friends to each other and how we are to love each other. And I personally thank God for my best friend who I love like that, and I know she loves me like that. If you have friends in your life that you have grown apart from or that you have moved away from for ridiculous reasons, fix it. Okay? Fix it. You have a man who, I mean, what more legitimate reason to not be friends with someone than your dad is trying to kill me? What more legitimate reason to not be friends with someone than I should be king next, but you're going to be king next? These are ancient situations, but if you put them in modern context, what more reason did these two men have for not being friends with each other than that? And instead their souls were knit so much so that none of that mattered. None of that mattered. They loved each other till the end. That's what love is. And that's what friendship is.